It started on a night when rain drowned the city. Seattle, November 12, 1994. Streets shimmered under streetlights. Water ran down glass, blurring colors, sounds, and shapes. The kind of night when people hurry home, and no one looks twice at a car pulled to the side of the road. Dr. Elaine Porter, 41, had just finished an 8-hour surgery at Swedish Medical Center. She was exhausted, but calm, precise, the same way she'd been every night for 15 years. At 10:47 p.m., she changed out of her scrubs, picked up her brown leather briefcase, and stepped into the rain. Before leaving the hospital parking lot, she made one last call. "I'm leaving now," she told her husband. "Should be home in 20. That was the last thing anyone ever heard her say. Elaine drove her usual route home, through downtown, up Madison, and over the Fremont Bridge. It was a path she could have driven blind. Her car, a silver Volvo sedan, was known among neighbors for being spotless and well-kept. She always locked it. She always followed routine. That night, the routine broke. The storm worsened near the bridge. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. At 11:15 p.m., a truck driver spotted a Volvo pulled slightly off the road, headlights on, wipers still moving. He slowed down, expecting to see someone fixing a flat or calling for help. But the car seemed empty. Steam rose from the hood, mixing with rain. When police arrived 20 minutes later, the engine was still running. Inside, everything looked untouched. Her white doctor's coat lay neatly folded on the passenger seat. A sealed food container sat beside it. Her handbag was placed between the seats, wallet, phone, and keys all inside. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken glass, no forced entry. It looked as if she had simply stepped out for a moment and never returned. But outside the car, things didn't add up. In the mud near the driver's side door, officers found deep footprints. Men's size 11. Soaked, but distinct. They stopped abruptly. By morning, people started to notice what was missing. At 7 a.m., her colleagues at Swedish Medical called home. Elaine never missed a shift. Her locker was untouched, her operating schedule still pinned to the board. When her husband arrived at the hospital, holding a soaked umbrella, he told officers she hadn't come home. Not even a call. Not even a message. The search began quietly. Police retraced her route from the hospital to the bridge. They checked bus stops, parking lots, nearby motels. Nothing. The Volvo sat in the impound yard like a question no one could answer. Her last words, "should be home in 20, turned into a haunting timestamp. Some way in that narrow window, between routine and disappearance, something irreversible happened. By dawn, the rain had stopped. Mist clung to the bridge, soft and pale. A few cars passed, unaware that one of Seattle's longest mysteries had just begun. By morning, she was gone, and Seattle had its first rain-soaked mystery in decades. As we move forward, the story of Dr. Elaine Porter deepens. Who she was, who might have wanted her gone, and why her case would haunt investigators for more than 2 decades. If you're following this series, don't forget to like, share, and leave your thoughts below. Every comment helps keep stories like this alive, because every case deserves to be reopened, and every name deserves to be remembered. Before she became a headline, Dr. Elaine Porter was known as the doctor who never called in sick. In 15 years at Swedish Medical Center, she had never missed a shift, never shown up late, and never left a procedure unfinished. Her colleagues called her the metronome, steady, precise, predictable. At 6:45 every morning, she walked through the main entrance with a thermos of black coffee in one hand and a worn leather notebook in the other. Her record spoke for itself. Over 2,000 successful cardiac surgeries, 0 malpractice claims, and a spotless file with the Washington State Medical Board. She wasn't the kind of doctor people liked for her warmth. She was the kind they trusted for her accuracy. Nurses said she ran her operating room like a clock. One of them later recalled, she'd rather redo a report herself than let it be wrong. Outside the hospital, her life followed the same rhythm. Elaine lived with her husband, Thomas Porter, a mathematics professor at the University of Washington, and their 16-year-old son, Ryan. The family lived in Northgate, 15 minutes north of downtown Seattle. Her neighbors described them as quiet, polite, almost too organized. Their front lawn was always trimmed, the porch light always off by 10. There were no arguments, no signs of strain. Police later found no evidence of debt, infidelity, or family conflict. Elaine's discipline made her respected but also isolated. She wasn't the kind to join co-workers for drinks or office gossip. Her social circle began and ended at the hospital. That focus, that strict sense of right and wrong, eventually put her on a collision course with two people who would later dominate every theory about her disappearance. The first was Dr. Marcus Hale, a talented but ambitious surgeon in the same department. For years, Hale and Porter had worked side by side. He was known for charm, she for control. But by the fall of 1994, their professional rivalry had turned personal. Hale had pushed a proposal to shorten sterilization procedures in order to increase surgical volume. Elaine rejected it outright, citing infection risk and ethics. The second conflict came from outside the operating room. Janet Ruiz, the hospital's administrative manager. Elaine had uncovered irregularities in supply budgets, thousands of dollars in unaccounted purchases signed under Ruiz's authorization. She filed a formal report to the board in early November. Ruiz was furious. "She's not the angel she pretends to be," she allegedly said to staff afterward. The board scheduled an internal audit for the following week. Elaine was tasked with presenting her findings, a detailed report, including the missing funds and documentation that tied them directly to Ruiz's department. That report would later vanish with her. Colleagues who worked with Elaine that month noticed the growing tension. She didn't complain, but she worked later, often long after everyone else had left. One nurse remembered seeing her office light on past 10, the blinds half drawn, her silhouette moving between file cabinets. Her daily routine left no room for surprises. Up at 5:30, out the door by 6:15. Surgery from 7 until afternoon. Review meetings in the evening. She usually called home the moment she left the hospital. Her husband told police she never skipped that call. Except once, on the night she disappeared. That night began like any other. It was Friday, November 11th. Elaine was finalizing her report for Monday's board review, the same document that could expose Ruiz's financial discrepancies. The last people to see her were a pair of night shift nurses. At around 10:30 p.m., they passed her in the hallway carrying a brown briefcase and a stack of folders. One of them recalled her saying, "I'll lock up. Go home." They left. The security guard on duty didn't see her exit through the main doors. When police later searched her office, they found no sign of forced entry. But one thing was missing: the folder containing the audit report. Her desk drawers were open, papers scattered, as if someone had been looking for something specific. Her computer hard drive had been wiped clean of recent documents. Investigators noted that her work schedule, down to the last printed calendar on her desk, showed no indication she planned.
As the next part unfolds, the investigation turns toward those two names, Hale and Ruiz, whose rivalry, resentment, and fear would make them the first suspects in a mystery that refused to fade. The morning after the discovery of the Volvo, the search turned inward. Detectives walked the halls of Swedish Medical and made a simple call. If someone wanted to silence Elaine Porter, the reason likely lived inside these walls. Within 72 hours, two names rose to the top of every memo and whiteboard: Marcus Hale, Janet Ruiz. Different jobs, different motives. The same proximity to a woman who did not bend rules. Hale was the rival surgeon, 45, charismatic in public, impatient in private. He had once been Elaine's mentor, then her competitor. His proposal to speed turnover by trimming sterilization steps had died the day she stood up in a board meeting and cut it to pieces. The witnesses remembered her tone, calm, clinical, brutal. They also remembered his face. Pride took the hit first, then ambition. Weeks later, the board nominated her, not him, for the soon-to-open chief position. The corridor rumor had a single spine. He'd been beaten by someone who refused to play politics. On paper, he looked obvious. On camera, not so simple. He told detectives he was home by 11, watching football with his wife. But a side-lot camera at the hospital caught his sedan leaving at 10:35 p.m., the same window Elaine left the surgical wing. When asked, he said, "I forgot my pager. That's all." The answer was neat and short. It didn't close the gap. Ruiz was the administrator with something to lose. 38. Sharp with spreadsheets, sharper with people. Elaine had written an internal report tying her department to missing supply funds and phantom orders. The board had an audit scheduled. Ruiz faced a suspension that could become a firing. In interviews, she oscillated between anger and fear. "She wanted to ruin me to prove she was right," she told an investigator, voice thin and tight. The line between grievance and motive had never looked closer. Her alibi sounded stable until it wasn't. She swore she left by 8:30 p.m. and met a friend in Capitol Hill. Then the parking receipt surfaced, a timestamp at the hospital's south gate, 10:52 p.m. Her explanation came with tears. "I went back for my purse. That's it. I didn't even see her." The story was possible. It didn't explain why the gate camera never recorded her walking in on foot. Detectives built timelines like scaffolds. They measured minutes and doors and weather. The rain took most of the edges off. What remained was statements, a few frames from damaged tapes, and human behavior under pressure. Hale's first sit-down lasted 2 hours. He spoke in complete sentences and looked investigators in the eye. When they repeated witness accounts of him losing his temper in an October meeting, he didn't deny it. "She embarrassed me," he said, dead flat. "That doesn't make me a criminal." When they pushed the 10:35 p.m. departure, his voice sharpened. "I told you why. Pager. I drove out, realized it wasn't there, and went home. My wife will confirm what time I walked in." The interview transcript marked the first spike in tone with a bracketed note. Table strike. He had hit the edge of patience. Ruiz's first sit-down was a different map. She came in defensive and left undone. "She's not the angel you think,"
she snapped at one point. She pretends it's for patients, but it's about power. When the receipt came up, she faltered, then folded into tears. I just needed my purse, she said. I was scared. You have no idea what it feels like to have your love. Elaine, I'm protecting a patient. Do you want the outcome or the billboard? Hale, get off your high horse. You think you're the only surgeon who cares? Elaine, prove it. Follow the protocol. Elaine, I corrected a dangerous idea. Hale, you're not chief yet. Elaine, neither are you. Hale leaned in and lowered his voice. The therapist made out only the last line. Keep pushing me and see where it gets you. Elaine didn't flinch. It gets me to Monday's board meeting. The elevator opened and the argument ended in two different directions. The therapist never reported it. No one had asked until a missing person turned the ordinary into evidence. The Ruiz conflict came from another corridor, finance instead of surgery. An assistant in purchasing described an afternoon confrontation in an office with the blinds open, both women standing, the air electric. Elaine was holding the audit draft. Ruiz was shaking. Ruiz, you don't know what those numbers mean. Elaine, they mean money left the hospital without oversight. Ruiz, you think you're a hero. Elaine, I think I'm responsible. Ruiz pointed at the folder. Put that down or I swear I will make sure you regret it. Elaine's reply was simple. Monday. She placed the folder in her briefcase and left. The assistant watched Ruiz sink into a chair and stare at the door. To her, it looked like defeat. To detectives later, it looked like motive. The next weeks belonged to interviews, lab cues, and patience. The smear on the Volvo's door produced a partial print with edges too soft to tie. The umbrella found near the guardrail didn't belong to Elaine. Rain washed any usable trace from the grip. The footprint in the mud was larger than hers. It might have been Hale's. It might have been anyone's. In the first month of a case this thin, might did too much work. Media pressure intensified. Local anchors ran the same montage nightly. The car under rain, the bridge lights, the headshot of a brilliant surgeon now missing. On day 10, the headline landed. 2 rivals, 1 missing surgeon. It stuck. Talk radio called it a hospital power struggle. Online forums, primitive but loud, split into camps. Hale's supporters cited his surgical outcomes and accused Elaine of sabotage. Others demanded Ruiz's arrest on the assumption that money is motive enough. The police said nothing beyond the basics and the absence of a body. The family begged for quiet. They got the opposite. Hale agreed to a second interview only after his attorney arranged it in the presence of his wife. He told the story again. He left at 10:35 p.m., looked for a pager he thought he'd left in his car, then drove home. His wife placed him on the couch shortly after 11. When pressed about the October meeting, his eyes hardened. She made me look reckless, he said, but I'm not. And I didn't follow her to a bridge. He swore he hadn't known about the internal audit documents. When shown a memo referencing the board schedule, he shrugged. Everyone knew about Monday. It was the gossip of the week. Ruiz's second interview was raw and circular. She admitted returning to the hospital after 10, a purse left behind, she maintained, but denied going near the surgical wing entrance or the side lot. When told her car passed the south gate at 10:52 p.m., she insisted she used a back entrance, ran in, grabbed the purse, and left. Who saw her? She said no one. Why keep the gate pass if she planned to hide the trip? I didn't plan anything, she said, voice cracked. I panicked. Detective Ryan Keller, Jr. at the time, kept a small notebook. Seth froze. The words were not careful. Hole. You're not taking my department, Elaine. I'm not taking anything. I'm doing my job. Hale, your job is cutting people open, not cutting me down. Elaine, then stop giving me reasons. Hale's last line came like a hiss. You'll regret this. The nurse stepped around the corner and made noise with a tray to break it up. Neither surgeon looked at her. They walked out on opposite sides of the wall. Detectives logged the statement, weighed it, and knew it would play badly in the press. But threats in a hospital aren't rare. They usually deflate by morning. Without a body, without blood, without a witness who saw Elaine with either suspect after 10:30 p.m., the case had shape, but not weight. 6 weeks in, frustration settled over the squad like the same rain that washed the bridge. The lab backlog was months long. The budget was thin. The chief asked for progress. The captain asked for patience. Reporters asked for a face to put under the word suspect. Families asked for answers. The file grew thicker and emptier at the same time. Keller pushed for a wider net: maintenance staff, security contractors, night shift vendors who moved unseen. The request didn't land with urgency. The story on the street had already decided the cast: a surgeon and an administrator. When a case gets a headline that fits, it's hard to pull it off. By January, Hale's attorney sent a formal letter threatening litigation if the department continued to defame a respected physician through insinuation. The same week, Ruiz received an official termination notice from the hospital citing procedural irregularities and loss of confidence, but no criminal charge attached. She packed her office alone. The last camera to see her had nothing to do with the bridge. It was the same south gate she had driven through in November. Inside the bullpen, the language changed. Person of interest softened to cooperative witness. The whiteboard lost 2 photos. The file gained a dull stamp: inactive, pending new evidence. To the pub, the nurses whispered that the department would never recover from the suspicion. The surgeons scheduled cases and pretended the air wasn't thinner. The hospital board moved the chief vote to the spring and never said the name out loud. The family marked time by weeks, then months. The press didn't let go. They ran side-by-side photos and asked viewers to weigh the faces of a career built on perfection against 2 people trapped in their own reputations. One anchor signed off with a question meant to hurt: is this a disappearance driven by jealousy, or something worse, hiding behind hospital doors? The call-in line lit up. People love a story that picks a villain for them. Keller kept his own quieter story in a drawer. It started with a sentence he had written on day 10 and underlined on day 40. Both have motive. Both have fear. Neither feels like the one who followed her. He looked at the gate logs for contractors. He made a list of staff no one had interviewed because they didn't wear white coats or carry clipboards. He asked for permission to pursue it. He got a shrug. Weeks became 6. 6 became 8. Without a new lead, the file went cold by policy, not by belief. The official note was neutral and careful. Primary suspects cleared, pending new evidence. The unofficial feeling in the room was anything but. Relief for some, resentment for others, a hole for everyone. In the final internal debrief, the captain asked each detective to state a position for the record. Most said Hale or Ruiz by gut, even if the evidence wasn't there. Keller said neither. The room went still. He pointed to the smudged frame, the umbrella, the print, the timeline that put two people close, but not close enough. "We're staring at the wrong fight," he said. The rain didn't just erase the scene. It hid the person who never made our board.
Outside, winter finally broke and the sidewalks dried. Inside, the whiteboard did not. It just got erased. Elaine's photo moved from the open case wall to the closed case shelf. The families kept calling. The hospital stopped commenting. The city turned the page and left it dog-eared. From the distance of years, it's easy to forget how sure people felt in those first months, how right they were about the noise, and how wrong they were about the signal. The surgeon who shouted in a hallway looked like a ready-made suspect. The administrator who faced exposure looked like the other half of an easy answer. Both wore the heat of their words on their faces. Both could not walk cleanly away from what they said out loud. But words don't place a body. Cameras don't always see the most important step. And a city that believes it already knows the ending often misses the first page of the truth. Seattle thought the case had narrowed to two people standing under the brightest lights. It hadn't. The rain had washed more than evidence off the bridge that night. It had hidden the man the investigation should have found long before the tapes were restored and the files were scanned. As we move forward, the story leaves the argument inside the hospital and follows a quieter thread, one buried in contractor logs, maintenance schedules, and a face no one recognized until technology made him visible. The rain didn't stop through the night. By dawn, the bridge at Fremont was wrapped in flashing lights and yellow tape. Officers moved under canvas tents as the downpour thickened. The Volvo had been towed and sealed for examination. Inside, everything was in order. The white blouse folded on the back seat, the unopened lunch container, her purse on the floor. What was missing was the brown folder she'd carried out of the hospital. From 10:47 when she called her husband to 11:15 when a patrolman found the car idling by the railing, only 28 minutes passed. Those were the last verified minutes of Dr. Elaine Porter's life. Canine units swept the waterfront, flashlights cutting through the mist. The wind carried the smell of oil and rain. Dogs lost the trail 10 feet from the car. The water below churned too violently for divers. A helicopter was grounded by gusts. Officers found a broken umbrella, one size 11 footprint, and a long skid in the mud near the passenger side. Nothing else. Detectives turned to the hospital. Security pulled logs from every exit, checked badge swipes and parking passes. The night shift clerk confirmed seeing Porter leave alone through the staff door. A grainy VHS camera above that hallway caught 3 seconds of motion. A figure in a long raincoat following her at a distance. The face was lost to the static. Hale's car left the staff lot at 10:35 p.m. Ruiz's parking pass pinged at the south gate at 10:52. Both within range, both with reasons. Seattle PD formed a task force of 8. 2 teams, 2 angles. The internal unit handled Hale, Ruiz, and hospital staff. The external team chased everything beyond those walls: the bridge, the road, the dark river. A new detective, Ryan Keller, was assigned to knit the timelines together. His notes began with 3 words: rain,
hides truth. Hale arrived in a gray suit, silent until Hale's home, spotless. No mud, no wet clothes, no sign of struggle. Ruiz's office, boxes of receipts sealed for audit, but no sign of Porter's missing report. Maintenance found nothing in the hospital's lost and found room. The brown folder was gone. Investigators reconstructed her final week through witnesses. A nurse confirmed a shouting match between Hale and Porter inside the scrub room, an argument over surgical speed versus safety. A respiratory therapist described another near midnight in the hallway. Hale's voice low and sharp. "Keep pushing me and see where it gets you." She'd brushed past him without answering. Others recalled tension between Porter and Ruiz over the budget discrepancies. Ruiz allegedly told co-workers, "She's not as pure as she looks." The comments now read like warnings. Detectives staged a controlled confrontation on video. Hale and Ruiz questioned separately, but told that the other was accusing them. Hale folded his arms. "She's lying to save her job." Ruiz stared into the lens. He hated her because she made him look small. Neither shifted their story. The partial print on the Volvo door, blurred, incomplete, couldn't enter the outdated database. The broken umbrella wasn't preserved correctly. The fabric mildewed before lab work began. The VHS tape kept glitching and jammed twice during review. The note about a janitor named Lang from early interviews never reached Keller's desk. It sat scrawled in the corner of a report, barely legible. By December, the search turned outward. Patrol units combed shelters and truck stops for witnesses. Calls to the tip line brought dead ends. None matched the timeline. Divers found debris, but no body. A resident near the bridge claimed to hear shouting that night, a man and a woman, like an argument that ended too fast. In January, detectives brought both suspects back for a second round. This time, Hale had a lawyer. His story didn't change. "I left, couldn't find my pager, went home." His wife backed him again. Ruiz, exhausted, admitted data. Keller kept pulling small threads no one wanted. He noted the unidentified fingerprint, the damaged VHS frame, the missing folder, the janitor's name barely visible in the margin of an early report. He wrote beside it, "Third presence." The memo went unanswered. In February 1996, 8 months after the night of the storm, the order came down. Suspend active pursuit, archive physical evidence, and reclassify the case as inactive, pending new information. Hale was quietly cleared, his name no longer on internal lists. Ruiz was dismissed from the hospital for unrelated financial misconduct but never charged in connection to the disappearance. By then, the rain had stopped being weather. It had become memory. The Fremont Bridge reopened. Reporters found new stories. Keller kept one file at his desk, a condensed timeline with 3 gaps he couldn't close. A tall figure in a raincoat trailing Porter through the staff door. A fingerprint that matched no one inside the hospital. A broken umbrella that didn't belong to her. He believed those 3 details held the answer. No one else did. By the end of 1996, the case slipped from daily rolls to storage shelves. Hale rebuilt his reputation. Ruiz left Seattle. The Porter family marked another winter without closure. The file waited 12 more years before anyone touched it again.
And when they did, the first name they noticed wasn't Hale or Ruiz. It was the one scribbled in faded ink. Lang. The janitor no one had ever questioned. Every cold case begins with a mistake. Every mistake leaves a trace. If you want to know how a lost memo and a broken tape revived the search for Dr. Porter, stay for Part 5. Theories and Dead Ends. Like, comment, and share if you believe forgotten evidence deserves a second look. By 2016, the file looked like any other box from a long, quiet shelf. Cardboard worn at the edges, a name in fading ink. Porter, Elaine, 1994. It moved across a rolling cart with a...
Seattle's digital cold case initiative was simple in design and ambitious in scope. Scan, clean, and test everything old with everything new. Police IT imaged tapes that had sat in damp basements for decades. Forensics reran DNA on items that once seemed hopeless. Records teams stitched disconnected logs into timelines. Keller laid out the Porter evidence on a steel table and set the order of attack. Images first, trace evidence second, then cross-check against personnel rosters and maintenance logs the hospital hadn't fully shared in 1994. The tape went into a high-resolution digitizer. The feed was muddy, with rain trails cutting across the frame. Technicians pushed the footage through software that stabilized motion, boosted contrast, and reconstructed missing fields. Hour after hour, the screen showed the same blur of wet cement and reflected light. Then a technician scrubbed through at quarter speed and stopped. 3 seconds, nothing more, of a tall figure under a long raincoat stepping into view behind a woman in a hooded jacket. The figure's head was covered by a hard hat, the kind worn by maintenance crews. The woman's gait matched the last known description of Dr. Elaine Porter leaving the side entrance that night. The face behind the visor was unrecognizable. The stride, though, was wrong for the two people who had dominated the early investigation. Keller compared the height against known reference points in the frame and against Dr. Marcus Hale and Janet Ruiz. It didn't fit either one. He wrote a new line in his notes. Third presence, likely maintenance or contractor, seen within 10 feet of Dr. Porter. The timeline finally had a shadow it could name. Not who, but what. They switched from video to paper. Keller's team reread every interview summary, every memo scrawled in the margins. Near the back of the binder, a single line from a 2010 administrative review jumped out, a note ignored when the hospital reorganized. We used to have a janitor named Lang. Strange guy. He disappeared around the same time. No last name on file in the report, no follow-up line, a rumor that had never become a lead. Keller pulled trace evidence came next. In 1994, the cracked watch recovered from the car had been swabbed with limited results. Technology then couldn't separate a mixed, degraded sample. Technology now could. Forensic analysts took tiny lifts from the underside of the watch's clasp, where skin cells persist when nothing else does. They ran an amplification cycle built for low-copy DNA. The first pass produced a partial male profile, usable, but not enough. The second pass filled the gaps. It didn't match Hale. It didn't match Ruiz. It didn't match family. Keller sent the profile to state databases and searched for employment-linked DNA from hospital background checks. Nothing. He broadened the search to known offender files from the late 80s and early 90s. A hit landed out of Tacoma archives. Victor Lang. The room went quiet.
A forensic tech looked at Keller and said, "It's clean. We're well above threshold." Keller nodded and wrote a sentence he had waited decades to write. The print we couldn't name in '94 finally found its face. Now the case moved across a state line. A records pull showed someone with the same birth date as Victor James Lang applied for utilities in Oregon in 1995 using the name Victor Lang. The address belonged to a rental behind a lumberyard outside Salem. That name appeared again on a maintenance roster for an industrial park. The work was overnight. The hours would have suited a man who'd spent years under fluorescent lights. Keller called Oregon State Police. The plan was quiet. No door knock, no alarm, just a legal path to a fresh DNA sample. Detectives watched Lang's routine for a week. On trash day, officers collected a bag he set on the curb. Inside, a disposable razor and a toothbrush. The lab compared the profile to the watch sample. It was a full match. They moved at dawn. Lang answered the door in a gray work jacket, surprised but not rattled. He listened to the warrant being read, eyes flat. When an officer said Dr. Elaine Porter's name, he blinked once and said, "That name again." He didn't fight. Seattle learned the news within hours. The headline on the evening broadcast was short: "Cold Case Breakthrough. Arrest in 1994 Disappearance of Surgeon." Colleagues from Swedish Medical called one another with voices they hadn't used in years. A scrub nurse who had worked with Dr. Porter told the reporter, "She kept clocks on the wall because seconds mattered." Seeing this case move again, it feels like someone finally respected her seconds. Another coworker texted Keller, "We were always told to move on. Thank you for not doing that." Keller stood at the Fremont Bridge and watched the water that had swallowed so much of the story. "Back then, we didn't fail because we didn't care," he told the camera crew who asked him why the case had gone cold. "We failed because we didn't have the tools. Now we do." He pulled from his folder a printed still from the 3-second clip. The image was still muddy. The person in the raincoat was still faceless. But the outline now pointed to a name, and a name could be brought into a room and questioned. While logistics moved, Keller cleaned the narrative. He removed what had hung there for decades out of habit. Hale and Ruiz were documented as cleared in light of the DNA. The internal dispute that once carried the investigation because it felt like a story people understood was returned to what it had always been: context, not cause. The new spine of the file carried a clearer chain: video, personnel logs, employment separation, relocation, DNA link, corroborating items in residence. Every page shortened the space between that box and a courtroom. Lang arrived in Seattle in May 2018 and was booked into the county facility. Intake noted calm affect. He signed the property sheet without comment. The interrogation room was prepared with its ordinary furniture and extraordinary weight. Keller rehearsed the timeline one more time. He wanted no gaps that gave a man like this room to wander. Not exist yet. Keller placed the bag on the table and looked at the man across from him. Lang stared back. His pulse didn't show in his neck. The first 30 minutes were formal. Names, rights. In the bullpen outside, a young detective watched the clock on the wall and asked the forensic tech if the 3 seconds on the tape had really made the difference. The tech nodded. "Sometimes you don't need a face," she said. "You need direction. After that, everything else knows where to go." The hospital issued a statement that afternoon. It didn't review the past or reopen old arguments. It said one thing only: After 2 decades of doubt, a name has been presented. We stand ready to assist in any way that brings clarity. Dr. Hale and Janet Ruiz were invited to a private briefing. Hale looked at the evidence table with the same posture he had taken during operations, hands steady at his sides. "For 20 years, people looked at me like I was a suspect," he said to Keller quietly. "That ends today." Ruiz spoke less. She stared at the printout of the hard hat figure and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. By evening, the unit reorganized the caseboard for the first time since the mid-90s. The 2 photos that had hung as principal suspects came down, labeled as cleared. In the center, a single name stood with the word linked next to it: Lang. The chain of custody logs for the watch and umbrella were rechecked a final time. The 3-second clip was burned to a separate drive and backed up twice. The file that had once read like a question now read like a root. There would be no victory lap in a room like this, only the next necessary step. Keller looked through the glass at the man in the chair and at the objects that had waited longer than any case should have to wait. He thought of the sentence that had opened the file in 1994 and felt, for the first time, that the distance between then and now could be measured. The city didn't sleep easily that night, but it slept knowing the case had moved, not because of luck, because someone finally had the tools and the time to see what the rain had hidden. As we move forward, we step into the 14-hour conversation that followed, every pause, every deflection, every shift in tone, ending in a statement Seattle had been waiting 24 years to hear. It had taken 24 years to... He said it like a habit, not a defense. His voice was calm, even bored. He didn't look at Keller, just at the gray wall behind him. Keller asked about the hospital, the maintenance shifts, the sudden resignation 3 days after the night Dr. Elaine Porter disappeared. "People leave jobs," Lang said. "That's not a crime." Keller had seen this kind of quiet defiance before, the kind that sits behind routine sentences and waits to see if the other man gets tired first. He didn't. He opened a sealed envelope and slid it across the table. "We ran your DNA, Victor." Lang didn't touch it. He just stared at the label, then let out a small laugh. "DNA sticks to everything." Maybe she shook my hand. Keller's tone didn't move. "You'd have to grab her wrist, not her hand, to leave that much of yourself behind." The air went still. The sound of the air conditioner filled the silence like a clock. Lang looked down at the table, tracing the edge of his cup. "You're reaching," he said. Keller opened another folder, a still frame printed from the 3-second video recovered from the hospital camera. He pushed it forward. A dark figure in a raincoat and hard hat trailed behind a woman in a hooded jacket. The outline of her bag, the angle of her walk. The last clear image of Dr. Elaine Porter alive. "That's you, right?" The raincoat, the hard hat. Lang's mouth tightened. "Could be anyone. You quit 3 days later. No forwarding address, no tax record for 3 years. You changed your name. You think that's a coincidence?" Lang looked up for the first time, his voice flat. "You cops never move on, do you? Not from a woman thrown into a river, or the first time." Lang blinked faster than usual. He leaned back, forced a smile that didn't stay. "You're just trying to close an old file," he said. "She probably ran off with someone." Keller cut him off. "She didn't. We found her watch, her car, and your DNA. The only thing missing was her voice. Until now." Lang slammed his palm on the table. The plastic water bottle rolled off and hit the floor. "You don't know what happened that night." Lang hesitated. Keller didn't answer. He stood up, turned off the recorder, and left the room.
3 days later, divers entered the river below Fremont Bridge. They found human remains caught in sediment 20 feet below, along with a rusted metal umbrella frame. The forensic report matched the trauma to a fall from height. The watch still fit the bone of the left wrist. The time had stopped at 11:16 p.m. Lang's account, partial, distorted, lined up with every physical fact. He hadn't confessed to killing her, not directly, but he had confessed to being the only person who could have stopped her death, and didn't. When Keller signed the report, he wrote one last sentence. He didn't confess to murder. He confessed to leaving her behind. Outside the building, rain started again, steady, fine. The same kind that had erased footprints 24 years earlier. Keller stood at the window watching it fall over the city and the bridge where it had begun. 24 years, he said quietly, and it still ends in rain. By morning, the news had spread. Confession in Seattle surgeon case. Dr. Marcus Hale and Janet Ruiz were formally cleared. Hale issued a short statement. For 20 years, people looked at me like I was a killer. Today, that ends. At the river that night, the Porter family held candles on the bridge. Her son, now grown, held a photograph of his mother in her white lab coat. Reporters asked him how he felt now that the case was closed. He looked toward the water and said, "He took her from us, but he couldn't take the truth forever." Seattle called it justice. For Keller, it was something else, not an ending, just a name finally written next to a date. After 24 years, the city had its answer. It had always been waiting under the rain. It had taken 24 years, 2 suspects, and 1 broken umbrella to reach this room. Spring 2019. The courtroom at King County was full. Reporters, detectives, The rain didn't stop through the night. By dawn, the bridge at Fremont was wrapped in flashing lights and yellow tape. Officers moved under canvas tents as the downpour thickened. The Volvo had been towed and sealed for examination. Inside, everything was in order. The white blouse folded on the back seat, the unopened lunch container, her purse on the floor. What was missing was the brown folder she'd carried out of the hospital. From 10:47 when she called her husband to 11:15 when a patrolman found the car idling by the railing, only 28 minutes passed. Those were the last verified minutes of Dr. Elaine Porter's life. Canine units swept the waterfront, flashlights cutting through the mist. The wind carried the smell of oil and rain. Dogs lost the trail 10 feet from the car. The water below churned too violently for divers. A helicopter was grounded by gusts. Officers found a broken umbrella, 1 size 11 footprint, and a long skid in the mud near the passenger side. Nothing else. Detectives turned to the hospital. Security pulled logs from every exit, checked badge swipes and parking passes. The night shift clerk confirmed seeing Porter leave alone through the staff door. A grainy VHS camera above that hallway caught 3 seconds of motion. A figure in a long raincoat following her at a distance. The face was lost to the static. Hale's car left the staff lot at 10:35 p.m. Ruiz's parking pass pinged at the south gate at 10:52. Both within range, both with reasons. Seattle PD formed a task force of 8. 2 teams, 2 angles. The internal unit handled Hale, Ruiz, and hospital staff. The external team chased everything beyond those walls: the bridge, the road, the dark river. A new detective, Ryan Keller, was assigned to knit the timelines together. His notes began with 3 words: Rain hides truth. Hale arrived in a gray suit, silent until later that afternoon. The son of Dr. Porter took the stand. 29 years old now, tall like his father but with her sharp eyes. His voice shook at first, then steadied. "I don't remember her voice anymore," he said. "But I remember the sound of the rain that night. I was 12. I waited by the window." He turned toward Lang. "You took her from us, but you didn't take her story." No one moved. Even Lang looked away. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned. The foreman stood and spoke the words that Seattle had been waiting to hear for 24 years. "Guilty. Second-degree murder." Lang didn't react. No shock, no anger. Just a slow shrug, as if he had already known. The judge read the sentence. 25 years at Walla Walla State Penitentiary. The courtroom exhaled as one. Keller looked at the Porter family. They held hands tightly, their faces calm, eyes wet but steady. By evening, the headlines were everywhere. "The doctor who never came home, case closed after 2 decades." Flowers appeared overnight at the Fremont Bridge. Cards, candles. A note written in blue ink. "You're home now, Dr. Porter." Swedish Medical lit its front tower in white for one night. The banner outside read, "For Dr. Porter, who saved lives and reminded us to keep searching for truth." 2 days later, the hospital held a press conference for the people once accused. Dr. Marcus Hale stepped forward to the podium. His voice cracked once, but didn't break. "For 20 years, people looked at me like I was a killer. Today, that ends." Beside him, Janet Ruiz, the former administrator who'd lost her job and reputation after 1994, wiped her eyes and spoke softly. "She was right about me being careless with the reports, but she didn't deserve what happened. None of us did." The applause was quiet, restrained. Not celebration, just relief. That night, Detective Keller went back to the bridge. Reporters found him standing in the drizzle, looking down at the dark wall. The course taught young detectives how to preserve evidence, analyze old DNA, and use digital forensics to uncover what the 1990s couldn't. During one lecture, an instructor summed it up perfectly. This case didn't just solve a murder. It rebuilt the meaning of patience in investigation. Keller retired later that year. Before leaving, he placed a copy of the case file marked "Closed" back on the shelf of the cold case unit. On the final page, he wrote one line: "Her case began in rain. It ended in light." By then, the story of Dr. Elaine Porter had already outgrown the courthouse. It had become a lesson, a quiet proof that even after decades of silence, truth can still find its way home. It was spring again in Seattle, 1 year after the verdict. The sky was clear, the bridge quiet. The Porter family stood at the same spot where the story had once begun, in rain. They placed a bouquet of white flowers against the railing, the same place where searchlights had cut through the water years before. Next to the flowers, a note read, "We found her. Now we help others be found." When a case closes, life doesn't go back to normal. It begins again, just differently. Thomas Porter retired from the University of Washington that year. He spent most of his life teaching logic. Now, he said, it had taken him a lifetime to understand faith. His son, Ryan, had grown into a quiet but driven man. He worked in biotechnology, and in 2020 he launched the Porter Initiative, a nonprofit that funded DNA testing for unsolved cold cases across the country. They didn't erase their grief. They turned it into purpose. Inside Walla Walla State Penitentiary, Victor Lang rarely spoke. He refused interviews, ignored reporters, and spent most days working in the laundry unit. The prison file described him simply: minimal interaction, no remorse, routine compliance. During his final psychological review, he said only one thing worth recording: "I didn't plan it. I just..." That same summer, the Cold Case Reform Act passed through the Washington legislature. It required every piece of physical evidence collected before the year 2000 to be digitized, retested, and preserved. In the first 2 years, 600 cases were reopened. 31 were solved, 3 of them linked directly to the same lab process that cracked the Porter case. The media called it the Porter effect, proof that science can still speak for the dead. Through Ryan's foundation, small-town police departments began receiving free DNA kits, lab support, and volunteer analysts. The motto was printed on every package: "Every file has a name. Every name deserves a voice." In just 18 months, the project raised over $4 million. In a viral video, Ryan stood before the Fremont Bridge, the same bridge that once hid his mother's truth. "My mom's story ended in water," he said, "but what we built after her keeps the truth alive." Seattle remembered too. Each November, Swedish Medical Center held a candlelight vigil called Light for Elaine. Doctors, patients, and students gathered around her memorial plaque. One young surgeon said on camera, "She taught us that precision saves lives, and patience finds truth." The bridge where she vanished now carried a small hand-painted sign: "Justice lives here." By 2021, the story had traveled far beyond Seattle. A podcast titled "The Doctor Who Never Came Home" became one of the most streamed true crime series of the year. A Netflix miniseries, Rain and Evidence, followed soon after. Online, thousands used the hashtag #ColdCasePorter to post about missing persons and cold cases in their towns. One comment under the show's trailer read, "If Keller didn't give up, why should we?" For 2 people once accused of murder, the verdict had changed everything. Dr. Marcus Hale returned to teaching medicine and published a book called Under Suspicion: Medicine and Misjudgment. Janet Ruiz joined a nonprofit that helps women falsely accused in professional misconduct cases. At a public lecture, Hale said, "Forgiveness, some stories end in silence. Hers ended in truth. And the story didn't die there. It became something else. A call for the next case, the next family, the next name waiting for someone to keep looking." If you believe every story deserves an ending, like, comment, and share. Every view keeps another case alive. Justice delayed isn't justice denied. Not if we keep looking. She disappeared in the rain. She was found in the archives.